Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy.
Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. On this episode of Brooklyn Savvy, we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is very, very important as we look at some of these racialized times that we're dealing with in New York City and the nation at large. We're going to be talking about white fragility. And I think that if someone really wants to understand and tackle issues around systemic racism and around white privilege, it's very important to understand what white fragility means and what we can do, Black people, people of color, and white people, to work together to advance conversations around race. So before I get started, I want to introduce those who are with us. We have Ellen Gottlieb. She's a guest. She's the founder of the Uncomfortable Book Club. We have Carol Sandonik, and she is also a member of the Uncomfortable Book Club. We have Mary Ellen Kramer of the Uncomfortable Book Club. And then we have my Brooklyn Savvy panelists, Lisa Bing, Jennifer Jones-Austin, Dr. Maria De Longoria, and Dr. Toby Sky. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to ask the first question to Ellen Gottlieb. Now, Ellen, you were the creator of the Uncomfortable Book Club. Talk to us about what it is and why you decided to do this.
Okay, thank you. The Getting Uncomfortable Book Club.
I got to put the getting in there. Right,
got to get that getting because you have to get uncomfortable. It's addressing uncomfortable conversations about race. And that's why I started it. But to go back to why I really started it, would you like to know that? Is that what you were asking?
Absolutely. What's the inspiration?
Well, unfortunately, it was the murder of George Floyd. And his little daughter said that, my daddy changed the world. Well, her daddy really changed my world. My life changed that day. And it set off a series of events that changed my life. From that, watching that on TV, being a part of it, and then being part of the communities that I'm in every day. I went to my chorus, and we had a town hall on what happened with George Floyd. And what moved me in that chorus was a video by Peggy McIntosh. I believe her name is McIntosh.
Yes,
and she wrote about white privilege, how it was unearned. And I got it immediately. And she talked about there's a line, and people above the line have white privilege, people below the line don't have it. And it just all made sense when she explained everything to me through this TED Talk. And she also said how rich her life became when she hired people below the white privilege line and she worked with them. And she said how rich her life became. And that made sense to me too. And I said, this is the way it should be. And again, I work at a real estate company, and we had a town hall of 15 people that work at the company, and they talked about how their life was exhausting trying to defend themselves the way they had to do being Black, and also being Black and being a realtor. Mm-hmm. One person said she walked out of a house and the cops were waiting for her.
Wow.
And one more thing, and then I'm in a leadership class with Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen was leading the leadership class, and we had a town hall, and I just started crying. I just couldn't fathom it. I couldn't hold it anymore. I was like, there's got to be something that I can do. And it was a leadership class, and it was to create a project, and my project was the Getting Uncomfortable Book Club. And
you reached out to me and you said, Toni,
Yeah.
would you like to join this? And I thought, gee whiz, this sounds like an incredible opportunity to make a difference. So I said, perhaps my savvy panelistas would be a really good group of women to help have this conversation. And the reason I thought that is because I have two subject matter experts. I have Dr. Maria De Longoria, who is a history professor at Med Rivers College, and I have Dr. Toni. So I figured we'd be able to have a really intentional, robust discussion around this. And if I may, I'd like for our audience to understand what white privilege is. Toby, can you talk to us about what white privilege is?
So picking up on what Ellen said about Peggy McIntosh, she is a white scholar, and what she says is white privilege is predicated on the fact that white people have unearned privileges based just on being white. And we fail as white people to acknowledge the impact of the majority of these privileges and the harm that we cause Black and brown people based on these unearned assets based on white privilege. It's more comfortable for us as white people to remain oblivious, to remain unaware, unresponsive, because to be conscious of the facts that our neighborhoods are segregated through historical redlining and inequitable access to mortgages based on race. Our education, our access to education and healthcare are based on race, and that George Floyd was killed, as so many Black men are, because he was Black and because our criminal justice system is grounded in a slave patrol mentality. This acknowledgement is really stressful for white people to bear, to hear. And so we choose not to think about it. We choose not to do anything about it, to remain oblivious.
So let's talk about that too. But before we do that, Maria, is there anything you want to add to Toby's definition around white privilege?
Yeah, I found something this week that I found quite interesting. There is a professor from Northwestern University. His name is Banner Hess, and he has what he calls the 8 white identities. And white privilege is one of those identities. I don't know, maybe some of you saw this floating around social media. But the 8 identities range from white supremacist being one, and I don't know if that's 1 or 8, but white supremacist is at one end of the spectrum, and white abolitionist is at the other end of the spectrum. And in between, there's white traitor, white critical, white confessional, white benefit, white privilege, white voyeurism. And it kind of breaks down where white folks would fall anywhere on that spectrum. So it might not be white privilege, it might be white voyeurs, and he defines them all. And I found that really interesting, and I think it goes nicely with what Toby was just talking about.
So I guess this gets into why the conversations are uncomfortable. So Marilyn, I want to know why these conversations are uncomfortable from your perspective.
Sure. So first of all, just listening to what everyone was saying before me, it's a matter of actually dealing with how disconnected I am. And until this conversation arose, I thought I was pretty connected. I have a lot of friends, but I just realized now when we started the Uncomfortable Book Club that there's so many things we never talk about. There's so many questions I never ask. And when we start to talk about it, then it's like the layers of an onion getting unfolded. Wow. Just that conversation that we were just speaking about redlining. I spoke with my friend who her first professional job as a Black woman was in the credit department of a bank, where they were told specifically that anyone from the zip code would not be approved, period. And we would never have discussed that, except that we were talking about white privilege. We were talking about the unspoken. And I've known this woman for 25 years. So what's uncomfortable is just really digging down and having a conversation about things that I would never have been aware of. And I have to deal with how it hurts. And I have to deal with my embarrassment, my shame for having someone that I love dearly not have the space to speak to me about these things and what she's experienced in her life. So I think that's what's uncomfortable. We're really getting down to those things that we never talk about. And yeah.
Kara, what do you think? Meaning when it comes to what makes these conversations uncomfortable?
I think it takes humility. It takes vulnerability to admit that we need to change. And that's really hard, I think, for a lot of people, especially when they don't know who they're talking to or trust the situation or anything. And I also think that, the truth of the matter is that the history of the United States, which, slavery started in 1619 here, we have a lot to account for. And it's very easy as a white woman in this world for me to ignore it and pretend it's not going on, because that is my privilege, right? I don't have to face it every day if I don't want to face it. It's a choice that I get to make. And so it confronts stuff and it's uncomfortable. A lot of people want to avoid the confrontation, but unless we do it, there won't be healing and there won't be change. And we need that.
So Lisa, is there anything that you want to add? I heard you, Oh, Lisa Big, yeah. What do you think about what you're hearing?
Well, as I participated in the Getting Uncomfortable book club, and it was instructive for me as a Black woman to hear and to a different perspective on the experience of race, the impact of the racial disparities and injustices in this country. Something that, in my circle, we talk about all the time, and starting to understand why the subject is so difficult for white people, in this case, it was a group of white women, to discuss, was a shift for me. And it caused me to have to also challenge my assumptions about, well, why is this new? How could you not know? And to recognize that others' experience is very different from mine, just like my experience is very different from theirs. So we're all kind of trying to come together in some ways, in some similar ways. So that was I guess my what do you call it? Response.
Your experience, yeah.
Well, my response to that, and listening to the experience of the white women coming to terms with the issues. Yeah. Jennifer, what is it that you'd like to share at this moment from what we've been talking about? Because I remember when we had the conversation around the word oblivious, you took exception to that very strongly.
I'm still taking exception. I mean, I'm also very curious to read about the thinking of the individual that Maria just spoke about. I'm still in the place of trying to figure out whether or not we really it's kind of 6 degrees of separation. Is it 8 degrees of white, privilege? Because it's privilege at every level for me. So I feel like I need to unpack that. I benefited from the book club discussion. I learned a lot. I met some interesting women who I believe are earnestly trying to unpack white privilege and what that means for them. I do find myself, I guess we're now 6 months in or so, wondering, what does it mean? How many books do you have to read to say, okay, what does this mean for my life? And what changes am I making? That's I guess where I am right now, trying to figure out, is it another book that we have to read? That where you begin to wrestle, or do you ever really begin to wrestle? Do we become more enlightened as a society and kind of sit in the space of, It is what it is. I once sat with a therapist who helped me to appreciate that there are three types of people in this world, as she put it. She said there are those who pretend that reality isn't reality. They say, no, that's not what it is. And that's, if you want to talk about white privilege and apply it here, that's what we say a lot of white people have been doing. Well, no, that's not really what it is. That's not really happening. And then she went on, she said, and then there are people who say, yeah, this is pretty much what it is, but so be it. Nothing's really going to change. And I believe that we have a lot of people who fall in that category. Mm-hmm. There's a third group of people who say, yes, this is the reality. It's not a good one. And I want to do something about it. And those are the people that you really should spend your time with, invest in. And they invest in you if you're so like-minded, because those are the people who are willing to do something and bring about change. So I think for me in this moment, and I'm not really just speaking about the people who are part of this evening's conversation, but in, just looking across our society right now, where are we all falling in this conversation about race? Are there's still those who are saying, yeah, it's not really happening. There's no real white privilege. People just need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and get ahead, right? And then there are those who are saying, yeah, it is what it is, and it's just going to be that way. Kind of like it this way. Where do we fall? Are we the ones who are saying, this is what it is, we don't like it, and we want to do things differently?
And that is what I'm hoping the Uncomfortable Book Club is all about. But I did not hear from Phyllis yet. And Phyllis, I want to get from you, what did you see as some of the challenges as we all started to talk to one another? Because I don't want our viewers to think that reading White Fragility was a cakewalk for us.
No.
We had some problems at the beginning.
Absolutely.
So it's some problems. You're right.
Absolutely.
And it took me a while to get these ladies on camera.
So I can tell you that first meeting for me, I thought I'd never come back. Actually, after that meeting, I found it more uncomfortable than I expected it to be. There was a lot of emotions in that room, and I remember walking away thinking, how are we ever going to accomplish a conversation where we actually are listening to each other? Or how are we ever going to get on the same page? It was uncomfortable. I remember talking to Toni. Remember, I called you the next day and I said, I don't think I'm coming back. And I really didn't think I was coming back. But as the week went on and I started thinking about some of the things that I heard, and the emotions moved away. I think that's what it is, out of my head. And I started thinking about it, I was pulled back in. And I continued to come to the book club. And I can tell you that each time I wanted more. I wanted to have more of a conversation. And so that lifts my heart and my hopes, because what I learned is that in the beginning, the conversation is difficult. And maybe along the way, you have your bumps in the road. But once you become accustomed to each other, once you start the conversation, there's opening for true connection, learning. I learned a lot. I'm going to tell you that speaking, I didn't even realize how uncomfortable speaking about race was. And that is probably because I've always spoken about race with other people of my own race. So I've not had those deep conversations with white people. So I recognize it gave me an opportunity to unpack that, and it started me on a road where I've joined other groups and I have joined other conversations. And I really think, I don't know about reading books, but I do think that honest, authentic dialogue is a way to where we want to go. Greater
So
understanding.
what made you uncomfortable? Meaning, what was it that was uneasy for you?
The push pull. That there were a lot of there were a lot of feelings, a lot of different ideas. Some of them I didn't understand. Some of them I probably was at odds with myself. I wasn't sure what my feelings were. As I said, I'd not been in this kind of a conversation before. And there was a lot of truth on both sides, but I don't think we were ready to hear each other's truths. It was a push-pull and a tug of war. And I said, if we're not going to listen to each other, being who I am, I'm always thinking about, what can I get? What can I hear from you? I'm one of those people that sit in the room and soak everything up. And what I heard was, well, if everybody's going to stick to their guns, where are we going from here? That was the initial meeting. And to tell you the truth, I think that was the only meeting that I felt that at. As we came back, something happened in that period of time between that gave us that resolve. Okay, well, I got that off my chest. I know what this is. So everybody came back ready to talk. That was what I remember, the way I feel it.
That we need to meet people where they are. And you've said this to me very many times, Phyllis. We have to create a listening. We have to be patient with one another.
Absolutely.
I tended to feel exhausted sometimes because I felt like I was just pouring so much out. And I began to feel a little unsafe at times too, because I'm always fearing retaliation for some reason or another, or understanding what the power dynamics are. But Toby has inspired me in many ways in her approach as a white female to how she deals with being white, with white fragility. Toby, talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you
how you
so
wake
much.
up every morning, and how you wake up every morning.
I've come to learn over time by studying racism, the real history of the United States, the true history, that I've been lied to throughout my life about all of the systems of society and how racist they are. And I have to spend the rest of my life working on how I've internalized that racism and how I have absolutely no question, harmed people of color along the way through my being oblivious. I think that's a real, I think that's absolutely been internalized, and it's harmful even as I speak now. I think what Jennifer's saying, like Toby, how can you be so oblivious? Because by being oblivious, white people don't have to unpack anything. We don't have to take responsibility. We don't have to do anything about it. We can lean on the fact that we're going to a book club, for example. We're talking about race. And then beyond that, not do anything in terms of anti-racist action. And so I've come to learn that for me to have morality and integrity, that I have to absolutely spend every day working on undoing the racism in my life and working on racial justice in this country.
Toni, can I say something?
Yes, please. Absolutely. And if you want to speak, people, just put your hand up. So go ahead, Maria.
So I mentioned that this 8 white identities, right, that has developed, and it's a chart, and it kind of talks. Some of the things Jennifer was talking about kind of coincides exactly with what he talks about, and what Toby was saying. Toby, according to his definitions, right, you don't fall under the white privilege mark you fall more in the white traitor or white abolitionist category, right? And that's defined as, so when you hear white traitor, your mind automatically goes one way, right? But the definition of a white traitor is someone who actively refuses complicity, names what's going on, intention is to subvert white authority and to tell the truth at whatever cost. You need them to dismantle institutions. And a white abolitionist is changing institutions, dismantling whiteness, and not allowing whiteness to reassert itself. So when Jennifer was talking about the kinds of people, those who want to do, those who really want to engage and do the work, that those two folks, and actually the third, his third category, white critical, also falls under that, I guess, characteristic of these three types of people that Jennifer referred to.
Thank you.
Can you say what his name is again, Maria, please? Sorry.
Yes, Banor, Barnor. His last name is Hess, or Hesse, Hesse.
Okay, now wait, you know what? What we're going to have to do now, though, is we're running up against time. So to all our viewers that are all riveted with this episode, we are going to have to close Brooklyn Savvy, but you'll see part 2 next week. So, ladies, I'm going to see you part 2 to talk more about some terminology. We're going to talk about what it means to be racist and what white supremacy means on the next episode of Brooklyn Savvy. We'll see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.